Sticking with cost and Boris's great dreams. Joining me now is Chief Economist at investment bank Panmure Gordon and a former economist at the Cabinet Office, Simon French. Simon, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Pleasure to join you.
So nearly 40 billion a year will be lost if we stop buying petrol and diesel. That's just for starters. Overnight, leaks, I suspect, from the Treasury suggesting £100 billion a year black hole. We are going to be taxed to goodness knows what to pay for all of Boris's dreams, aren't we?
So what you're describing came across very clearly in the report yesterday from the Treasury, that there's a erosion of the tax base that normally is filled by fuel duty, but as we move away from petrol and diesel and towards electric vehicles, that is going to gradually erode. So the Treasury has to fill a gap. Ultimately, the public finance has got three choices. It can either raise more taxes, it can find the elixir, which is to grow the economy faster, or it does spending cuts. And ultimately, you can boil it down which way you like, but those are the three choices facing the Exchequer. And if they're seeing an erosion because of this transfer towards net zero, they have to go looking for that tax elsewhere if they don't want to cut public services.
Yeah, some estimates are that the move towards net zero is going to cost £1 trillion sterling. No one really knows what it's going to cost. But, the argument, Simon, that I'm making here is already we have a series of tax increases coming in just a few months' time. We've got inflation that is here to stay, certainly for a period of time. Cost of living increases that are going up faster than wages. These are actually quite tight times for lots of families. The idea they're going to have to pay a lot more for Boris's green dream when clearly China isn't going to do anything. Politically, it's quite a dangerous thing to do, isn't it?
So I think you're alluding at a much bigger point here around the distributional impact of new taxes. Any good taxation scheme designed to incentivize people to transition away from hydrocarbons and towards greener sources of energy needs to take into account the ability to pay. And I noticed on your previous interview, you were talking about the capital upfront cost of air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. Those are some of the impediments to low-income households for taking advantage of what is likely to be a shift towards taxing gas and reducing the tax on electricity. But ultimately, what you want to do is have a well-designed tax system that takes into account that ability to pay. I would be very, very critical of any tax that didn't recognise, like all taxes, famously the sort of poll tax when it was introduced took no account of the ability of households to pay. I think we've come a long way from that period. We've got to make sure we don't make those sort of mistakes, because distributional outcomes are very important, particularly when we know that energy costs among low-income households are a big portion, more than 10, in some cases 15% of their budgets, and near term that's going to be very hard for them to absorb.
And as a former economist at the Cabinet Office, can I ask you, frankly, have they really thought this through? I get COP26 is coming up. I get the fact Boris Johnson wants to be seen to be this big global leader making a difference by being in the chair at this conference. And I can see that it's become his new political dream. But have they actually thought it through and worked it out, what this is going to cost ordinary families?
Well, if you measure the sheer amount of paperwork that was put in the public domain yesterday, then there's certainly been an awful lot of work done in this regard. But look, where you are correct is that there is no certainty the degree to which capital costs, jobs creation, the sort of growth transition, how that will evolve. But there is always uncertainty with any political decision. It doesn't matter whether it's on net zero, whether it doesn't matter whether it's education, health, and defence. You're always dealing with uncertainty. And what you try and do, and you mentioned my sort of past life, you try and minimise your errors. I think it's very naive to suggest that there are going to be no errors in this forecast, the estimates in terms of the tax burden, the upfront capital cost. But I do think when looking at the documents, there's an awful lot of work that's been done here. And the question you perhaps need to ask is, are there better, more credible estimates out there? And if they do, they should go toe-to-toe with the government's analysis and challenge it. That's what good analysis does. The public sector doesn't certainly have a monopoly on the high quality stuff. If there are people with better estimates out there, they should come forward, because that will benefit households longer term if government can sort of crowdsource good economic analysis.
Simon French, I suspect we're going to come back and ask you back to continue this conversation.